But we begin with a different type of history, as the Big Ten Conference has officially announced its new media rights agreement, the size, scope, and significance of which has never been matched in the history of sports television. Here are some of the details surrounding our big story. Big Ten Network, Fox, and FS1 will continue to broadcast Big Ten football, while CBS and NBC are also now football media partners of the league in a deal that stretches through the 2029-2030 football season. Once USC and UCLA join in 2024, each weekend will offer a national tripleheader, starting on Fox at noon Eastern, moving to CBS for a midday kick, and finishing on NBC in prime time. The championship game broadcast will now rotate, with Fox on the call in each odd-numbered year, CBS in 2024 and 28, and NBC in 2026. Big Ten Network and Fox will continue to provide in-depth men's basketball coverage, bringing you at least 170 games per season, while FS1, CBS, NBC, and NBC Universal's Peacock will also carry Big Ten men's basketball. Peacock will take over the opening night of the men's tournament, while the second round and quarterfinals remain on Big Ten Network, and CBS will continue its tradition of broadcasting both the semifinals and finals of the tourney. The women's basketball tournament will also see its opening night doubleheader move to Peacock. Big Ten Network then carries all the action for the next 10 games, leading viewers from round 2 through the semifinals. The champ game of the Big Ten women's tournament will have a new home, as CBS will carry the title game. Peacock will also play a larger role in broadcasting Big Ten Olympic sports postseason events. Big Ten Commissioner Kevin Warren had this to say regarding Thursday's announcement, quote, "The Big Ten Conference media rights agreements are more than just dollars and deals. They are a mechanism to provide stability and maximum exposure for our student athletes, member institutions, and partners during these uncertain times in collegiate athletics. We are very grateful to our world-class media partners for recognizing the strength of the Big Ten Conference brand and providing the incredible resources we need for our student athletes to compete at the very highest levels and to achieve their academic and athletics goals." End quote. Michigan reached nearly all of its goals a year ago, beating Ohio State, claiming its first outright Big Ten title in nearly 2 decades, and making the school's first college football playoff. While much of the Wolverines' offense returns, there are key departures on D and coordinator changes on both sides. Joshua Perry and Howard Griffith offer more from Ann Arbor.
Got to watch the Wolverines, and I think the first thing that comes to mind is impressive. Howard, where do you want to start with this team?
I think we start out with the practice overall. It's really a crisp practice, and they take care of one another. Sometimes we see teams in full pads, and you're seeing guys get knocked to the ground. You're seeing defenders tackling the ball carriers to the ground. We didn't see that. Everyone's staying on their feet, really flying around, a crisp practice. I was pleasantly surprised. This is a team that's lost a lot, but it looks like they're just ready to get really reloading at this particular point.
You know, that's the thing that stood out to me first off, was a lot of times you'll hear thud tempo, and what that means is you're not going to the ground, but they want the defenders to finish all the way to the football. And a lot of guys end up on the ground. Everybody finished on their feet. They really did take care of themselves. And when you start talking about the defensive side of the football, it was from walkthroughs where you heard all of the communication all the way up to the snap, and then even sometimes post-snap. That trickled into the team periods, and I know that was a big question for people because you have a new coordinator coming in. You lost a lot of faces on that defense, but it really seems like everybody out there is willing to do their 111th, and they're going above and beyond just in terms of making sure that everybody's on the same page.
I'm going to throw this right back at you because you're a defensive player and talking about communicating. These guys did a tremendous job of communicating. Why is that so important when you're putting in a new scheme?
Well, it's very important when you're putting in a new scheme. There's going to be a lot of carryover for what they did last year, but you want to make sure everybody's on the same page. When you go out there, everybody has to do their job, and if one person doesn't hear the call or what the adjustment might be, then everybody's out of sync. But especially when you're practicing against this type of offense that Michigan likes to run, where sometimes they'll go in the huddle and they'll have 3 offensive plays called. They're making adjustments. They're shifting players. They're motioning. Everybody has to understand that. Those big guys with their hand in the ground, they can't see everything that's going on, so they need the linebackers and the safeties to relay that information. That was certainly getting done. And I know a lot of the conversation here is going to be about the quarterback position, and I think we can say that both of those guys look pretty good today. But Cade McNamara is a player who I felt like didn't get enough credit throughout last year for what he did. And we saw him again come out, run an efficient offense. He hit the guys when they were open. He was taking what the defense was seeing. And to me, it seems like that quarterback room has really made the other players battling for that position a lot better.
Oh, well, I think you mentioned it, right? You look at the battle with J.J. McCarthy also stepping in today, making plays as well. But I think when a team can look at your quarterbacks competing at a high level, the other groups are going to compete. And what I mean by that is they're going to coach up one another.
Yes.
It's just not about, okay, you're the first team guy, I'm the second team guy, I'm not going to help you, I'm not going to communicate with you about what I see on the field. You see that communication happening out there. I think McNamara probably at this particular point is probably the front runner, I would say, because he's just so calm in what he takes.
Yes.
And you mentioned it, doesn't get a lot of the credit, and part of that is because he takes the easy throws.
Yes.
He's not forcing the ball a lot, and that's what you want to be able to do from an offensive standpoint, be able to control the tempo of the offense, and he does a great job at it.
And Jim Harbaugh's a guy who's going to want to go out there and be efficient. It's not necessarily about having the explosive play through the air. It's about making sure that they can stay on schedule, and that's something that Cade can certainly do for this offense, but that also goes to some of the skill players as well. We walk out here, we see Blake Corum. I think he's going to be one of the best running backs in the conference this year. He absolutely looks apart, practiced really well. And then the wide receiver room, and some guys that we tend to forget about, Andrew Anthony's of the world looking good out there. You get Bell back healthy, and he was a downfield threat today. It seems like the pieces are really coming together, and not to forget that offensive line that's losing some players, it looks like they haven't missed a beat either.
Yeah, that offensive line could be better than they were last year, have more athleticism up there. And we didn't mention the tight end. I think maybe the best tight end in the conference and all. He had some incredible catches today, and his ability to stretch the field, also blocking at the point of attack, makes him one of the guys that to me stuck out in this entire practice.
Eric All in his route running is still a little bit raw in my estimation, but he's got physical gifts where he can catch footballs that a lot of other guys couldn't make. But that blocking aspect is something that's really important too. And I saw one play early on in practice where he had to get out over the edge to block a defender out in space. Something really hard for a tight end to do, because as a defender, you know where the ball is. The tight end doesn't. You got to latch on and make sure you can drive a guy, and he absolutely did that. So as we evaluate this Michigan team, it looks like it's going to be a very good team, much like what we saw last year. And, I think a lot of people will be surprised to see that some of the pieces that they're missing from last year will be replaced with some really good players this year.
No Michigan team has ever won more games than the 2021 vintage. In fact, the 12-win plateau had only been reached one other time in the past century, and that year Michigan went unbeaten and claimed the AP National Championship. I am pleased to be joined by a familiar friend, good face, Dave Wannstedt. I think the last time that you were here, we were talking about Michigan in the Big Ten championship game. Exactly. And Dave, as you well know, it is one thing to beat your nemesis, to get to the goals that you had set since you arrived, as Jim Harbaugh did nearly a decade ago. It's something entirely different to build on that and continue that success the following year.
Absolutely, because when you have success and you're in the championship hunt, like they were, the playoff hunt, two things happen. And I've gone through this on both levels, NFL and college level. And what happens is you either become a little complacent, okay? Oh, we're okay, we got it all figured out. Or you get that, I call it team-friendly fire stuff going where, boy, why is the offense getting all the credit and not the defense? Or why we talking about the quarterbacks and not the offensive linemen? So there's things like this off the field that as a head coach, Jim has to deal with it head on to make sure, because everything sounds good now. You listen to hiring the guys. I mean, everybody's going to the championship. Everyone's in the playoffs right now. Those recruits look a little bit faster than they did when we signed them. The transfer guys, God, I can't believe it. Those coaches didn't do a better job coaching them. We'll get them squared away. All those things happen at this time of the season.
Well, it's a little easier to look that calm and confident and comfortable during training camp. A little bit different when, for example, October 1st, you're at Kinnick Stadium and the fans in that front row can basically reach into your team huddles. Of course, Michigan does have a ton to build on. A big reason why was their quarterback play of a year ago, because heading into 2021, it was a little bit of a question mark. Cade McNamara became a true leader, and while he was pushed by J.J. McCarthy, Dave, I have to believe that Howard is right, that right now this offense and this team still belongs to Cade McNamara.
Yeah, I would agree. And I think when I look at the whole Michigan thing, and we're talking quarterbacks, that's the starting point for this year's team. I think it's going to be somewhat reversed over the last few years when Jim Harbaugh was there and they were changing offensive philosophies and changing coordinators almost every year. and the defense was kind of the backbone. This year, I think they're going to have to start strong on offense. You know, when we talk about both quarterbacks, you know, one's a little bit better athlete. JJ, you know, is more of an athlete type guy. He likes to throw the ball down the field. Howard made reference to Cade takes the easy throw, and he's got the experience. I think Jim's going to play them both, but with the combination of the running backs coming back, Corum, Edwards, those guys back, Bell coming back from the receiver position, you know, the offense, I mean, the defense is where all the guys graduate. So I think this offense, and primarily the quarterback position, they're going to really have to carry the load early, at least during those preseason games.
I'm glad you also brought up Donovan Edwards because, yes, Blake Corum is going to be the guy back there, the workhorse. But Edwards showed us, especially late in the season last year, not just his singular talent, but his ability to catch the ball out of the backfield, which can make a huge difference if a quarterback starts to struggle. You have that check down 1 or 2 yards, let the back do the work. That could be a big help for Michigan's offense. They are going to need some help defensively because you don't just replace an Aiden Hutchinson, a David Ajabo, a Dax Hill. I know those are the Jimmies and the Joes. That's the more important. But to me, the X's and the O's here are critical because Mike McDonald did a great year, and after just 1 year now, he's gone.
Yeah, he's gone, and Jesse Minter comes in, who was a coordinator at Vanderbilt, but every coach has his, not necessarily different philosophy, but just his style, you know, of how he's communicating with the players. And I think when you have a young team right now, that's so important. And I mentioned how the offense, I think, is going to have to carry this team early, you know, at least during the non-conference games till they get their feet under them. But there's an old philosophy I used to say on defense. Hey, clear mind means fast feet. When you have a young football team, let's keep it a little simpler than we might have with Hutchinson and all the veteran guys that we had in the last couple of years. Let's keep it a little cleaner, a little simpler, and our young guys will be more productive. So I think they'll be fine on defense. I truly do. Just because they've got a lot of character there and obviously a lot of depth.
And it may be easier for the co-defensive coordinators or for Minter himself to keep it more simple. That way you don't get anybody confused on your unit, but you also don't overthink it yourself because sometimes a coach, just like a player, can suffer from that paralysis by analysis, trying to avoid that this year in Ann Arbor. But let's start with Indiana in terms of one of the Big Ten teams that intrigues you. And I'm sure they intrigue you, Dave, because 2 years ago, they came out of nowhere to have a season that no one expected in a positive sense. And then last year, not just unable to back it up, but they don't win a conference game. Tom Allen goes back to the drawing board, tells his team, I want you to remember everything that we went through last year so it doesn't happen again. How do they avoid it happening again?
Well, you know, that's good to say, and Tom Allen, you know, he needs to say that, you know, but when you look at their roster, I mean, there's so many players that are transferring in, right? They're going to have a quarterback that transferred from Missouri. They're going to have a running back, Shriver, that transferred from Auburn, right? Shivers. So, you know, to me, you know, you got to pull your team together. You got to try to build some confidence as fast as you can. But my starting point, and I would go back, Tom Allen, you were hired as a defensive guy. That's why you got the job. And you have to remember that, you know, your offense is going to take a little bit of time to come along. You're going to have to really get this defense. I mean, with the last 4 or 5 games of the season, they've given up 21-plus points a game. If you know what to do and give great effort, you should play good defense every week. So to me, when I look at this Indiana team, and we know that, I mean, you know, that there's going to be a lot of turnover, my biggest concern really is the defense. I mean, if they don't play great defense, this team is going to have a tough time getting out of the blocks.
Yeah, and a tough time replacing Micah McFadden, who basically did everything for this team defensively. They have a ton of transfers coming in. A couple of guys that Allen really likes being immediate impact players at both the linebacker and the defensive line position. We'll know very early conference game again for Indiana, opening up in league play this time against Illinois, trying to get back to that magic that they found in 2020. Now, Penn State struggled late in the year last year, but let's be fair to James Franklin's team. I mean, they had so many injuries, so many issues to deal with, especially at that running back spot. Sean Clifford is back. Manny Diaz, a guy who you know well, used to be the head coach of Miami, now the DC. I have a feeling when I start to look at this Penn State team that if Clifford plays and leads the way that we know he can, this could be a team that takes maybe the biggest step in a positive direction in the entire Big Ten this season.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, 4-0 when Sean Clifford was the quarterback. You said it, Rick. I mean, that's the key. 12 touchdowns, 3 interceptions when he was out there playing, and then go 2-6 after he gets hurt. He's the key. And the receivers, we talk about Tinsley and Washington. I think Penn State's the only school in the country that has 2 receivers that are on the Biletnikoff Watch Award. So they got some talent right there. The biggest thing with me, and we've been talking about it seems like for the last 5 years, you got to run the ball. How do you not have – they didn't have one running back rush for 100 yards last year. I mean, in the entire season. So is it offensive line? Is it philosophy to run the ball? Something's missing. And if you want to get a healthy year out of Sean Clifford, that offensive line, from a protection standpoint, they gave up the most sacks and most hits in the conference, and you got to run the football. They do that and get healthy with Mustipher and some of those guys who got hurt last year on defense. If they get healthy and they can run the ball, I think Penn State could be in the hunt.
And I think they have to run the ball effectively. I don't think they have to be explosive in the run game, just good enough. I called the Penn State spring game, and I got to tell you, those wide receivers, Washington and Tinsley, are known commodities.
And no one's talking about them.
They have so much depth, not just wide receivers. They have a ton of depth in the tight end room as well. And Manny Diaz is going to do Manny Diaz things. This defense is going to be physical, going to play hard. I got my eye on Penn State for a good reason this year.
And one last point for Penn State fans. Penn State was second in the conference in recruiting last year. I mean, so James Franklin and his staff are doing a great job of getting good young talent. They always do a good job recruiting. Great young talent on that team.
Now, Scott Frost went a different direction, still trying to recruit, but when what has happened at Nebraska has happened to Frost, and the way that it has happened, he needs immediate impact guys. So the way you do that right now in the day of college football is to go to the transfer portal.
Well, he went to the transfer portal. 16. The average in the Big Ten Conference is around 6 or 7 transfer portals. He's got 16, and he's got a new offensive coordinator. It's going to be a new Mark Whipple. So when Adrian Martinez was there, it was more of the quarterback run stuff. Well, Mark Whipple comes from Pitt, who had Kenny Pickett. Mark Whipple, the offensive coordinator at Nebraska, his background is not quarterback run. It is drop back, pro-style offense. So with all the pressure on Scott Frost, he's got the most players coming in that he's got to get into the system. And he's got a real change coming on offensive philosophy, I think. So it's going to be a challenge right out of the block.
I got to tell you, I think their opener against Northwestern in Dublin, which we'll get to a little bit more, break it down in a bit, I think it's so important because you also have Oklahoma early in the non-conference. If this team gets off to a slow start, you are going to hear a lot of grumbling and rumbling in Lincoln. And as you know, Dave, that can affect the team, usually in a negative fashion. They need to get off to a good start first. It's Northwestern, and then they're back home for North Dakota in week 2. Now, Minnesota, to me, in the West is fascinating for a couple of reasons, right? You lose 181 career starts on the offensive line. They had the most experienced offensive line in the country last year. 4 of the 5 guys are gone. But Mo Ibrahim comes back. Their running back room goes about 5 or 6 deep. Tanner Morgan has been in college since I think you graduated.
Yes.
Undergrad.
At least.
So you look at Minnesota.
And they got a new offensive coordinator.
But he's not so new.
No. Who was there?
Chiraka's back. I think Minnesota could be one of the best offenses in the nation this year if Morgan plays like he played in 2019.
I agree with you. I really like Minnesota. I mean, they've been knocking at the door. Last year, they were down to their 4th, 5th running back, right, and end up winning 9 games for the season. So P.J. Fleck, I mean, he is focused. He knows he's knocking on that door. He's got to knock it down. They got to go through the door this year. And I'll tell you, the offensive philosophy, I mean, they're talking about how good they were 2 years ago with Chiraka coming back. In 2019, we were in the top 5 in the country, and Tanner Morgan set all these records. So that's kind of where their focus is at. Everybody's bought in. They got good depth at running back. I mean, they got a couple freshman backs, one kid from Texas that they're excited about. So they've done a good job recruiting, and don't lose sight of that defense with Joe Rossi, right? I mean, the defense last year, they were a top 10, top 15 defense.
They got a lot to replace. Boye Mafe gone, Jack Gibbons gone.
But up front only. But I think the linebackers, and I like the secondary. I truly do. And I'll tell you what, they have they're playing with a lot of confidence. And if you keep it simple, like we talked about earlier on defense, you're going to play good.
Hey, listen, sign of good coaching, a disciplined team, right? PJ Flex teams are always among the least penalized in the country. That was the case, has been the case every year at Minnesota over the past century of Gopher football. Century now. There have been 4 9-win seasons. 2 have come under PJ Fleck over the last 3 years.
And I'll tell you how you help play defense too. Hold the ball for about 35 minutes a game, which they did,
yes,
right?
Yeah,
I mean,
exactly.
so you
ran it on
ball.
68% of the snaps a year ago,
There
more
you
than
go.
any non-service academy team in all of FBS.
That'll
football.
help that young defense. I agree with you, Rick.
All right. We are back on Big Ten today with your Big Stat, a list of the Big Ten players on the Maxwell Award watch list. This award given at the end of the year to the nation's best player. As always, quarterback and running back heavy. You'd have to say that C.J. Stroud, probably the favorite after his Heisman finalist campaign of last year, but Braylon Allen was one of the best backs in the country late in the season. Of course, Mo Ibrahim only played the first half and change against Ohio State before getting hurt. And Jackson Smith-Njigba, if you're an NFL team in need of a wide receiver, you know you are watching that guy closely this season. All right, Rick Pizzo back with Dave Wannstedt as we focus on individual players who offer us some intrigue, players we want to watch this year. And let's start with the Minnesota running back, Mo Ibrahim, who went down in the first game of the year last year, the season-ending Achilles injury and the loss to Ohio State. PJ Fleck has said over and over again, it's not just what he does for us carrying the football. He is a true team leader and a guy that everybody feeds off inside that locker room.
Yeah, and he's doing everything full speed right now. Obviously, he's very confident. You know, we have to go back to 2020, really, when he had the great year, led all Power 5 running backs with about 150 yards a game rushing. And at Minnesota, it's one of those teams where if you're defending them, they have an identity. You know what they're going to do, and you know what you have to stop, and they still make it happen. They still run the football consistently, and truly, I think Muhammad this year, he's had 9 consecutive games over 100 yards. When they know you're going to run the ball, and we say this is our goal, and he still does that, that's pretty special in my mind.
Let's focus on Minnesota's border rival in Wisconsin. We know Braylon Allen will be able to run the football. The question is, will Graham Mertz be able to be effective in terms of his quarterback play, and can he cut down on the mistakes?
He has to. I mean, it's been 2 years now since Wisconsin's been in a championship game, right? And to me, I mean, they find their running back right now, in Breland, right?
Braylon Allen.
Braylon Allen, he's going to be the Jonathan Taylor, and he came on strong at the end of the year. They're going to play great defense. To me, the missing ingredient is the quarterback. And maybe now they made Bobby Ingram, right?
Yep.
Former
New
Penn
OC.
State. Former Penn State. I actually drafted Bobby from here at the Bears. He's a new offensive coordinator. So maybe a change in the quarterback room. With Bobby Ingram in there, maybe that makes a difference for Graham Mertz. But if you say one thing, the turnovers are insane. I mean, you don't have to make great plays. Just don't kill us. I mean, he led, 15 turnovers he was responsible for a year ago. That was the most in college football. So, I mean, you got to change that, or you got to make a quarterback change. Because, hey, the old rule, you turn the ball over, you can't play.
He's the guy, though. He is going to be the guy, and they just need him to manage the game if, and it's a big if, that Wisconsin defense can do what it did a year ago. Obviously, they lose 8 starters from that defense, including Leo Chenal and Jack Sanborn. Speaking of Jacks, who play linebacker, let's head to Iowa City, because one thing remains constant in the Big Ten. Iowa's defense is going to be among the nation's best. If Campbell plays his best, that should be the case again in 2022.
Yeah, if Jack Campbell plays his best for Iowa, I mean, he's the front runner right now for Big Ten Defensive Player of the Year, preseason, and rightfully so. 140 some tackles last year, one of the best in the country. And the thing about Jack Campbell, they're going to be a little bit young in the back end, right? And so you kind of need a guy in the middle. And linebackers, they're tied in with a defensive line, stopping the run. But then when it's passes, they're involved with the secondary. So he's in a good position where his leadership, and I remember we did a special on him right here on this show last year during the season. And what this guy does off the field with his character and his attitude, you cannot put a price tag on that as far as his value to this defense.
And Phil Parker Parker absolutely loves him. And Phil Parker is maybe not the most effusive of guys when it comes to offering praise, but you want to talk about a defensive coordinator who knows what his unit needs to do and finds a way to make sure that they do it every year. That is Phil Parker. That's why Iowa's defense has been so good for so long. Let's talk offense and a player who lit up stat sheets a year ago in Purdue quarterback Aiden O'Connell. And he comes back. There's no quarterback competition for the first time in a long time at Purdue, but there's also no David Bell. There's also no go-to wide receiver before Bell. Of course, there was Rondale Moore. It is going to be tough, in my opinion, Dave, for Purdue to be able to match what it did a year ago.
Yeah, and there's we talked about Minnesota having an identity. You know what they're going to do? Well, when you play Purdue, you know what they're going to do. They're going to throw the ball. Jeff Brom, his brother is the offensive coordinator. They're all on the same page. I mean, this football team scored over 30 points the last 5 games of the season, went into the bowl game against Tennessee and scored 48. So, they're going to throw the football. And I think it all comes down to protection. We can talk about receivers, but I think Jeff Brom finds a way to get the ball to receivers. The big thing is, can they protect Aiden? If they do that, they'll be fine.
Yeah, and he really cut down on his turnovers late in the year because this is an offense that if you are going to throw the football that often, you know that sometimes you are going to get in trouble. And remember, Dave, this defense a year ago took a quantum leap. They were one of the best in the Big Ten. And so you lose Brad Lambert, the DC goes to Wake Forest. That probably puts a little bit more pressure on the offensive side of the ball, which, as you said, always has pressure in West Lafayette anyway. 2
things, over 70% completion last year, which tells me that he's getting the ball out quick. And we talked about receivers. I tell you, Auburn must not have any players left on their team because I was looking at my thing and I said, another guy is transferring. I mean, they got 2 receivers from Iowa that might be players they're counting on helping them, and a guy from Auburn again. So transfer portal. Everybody's just going to hang in there until you see these teams play and then figure out who actually is going to be making plays for them and who's not.
Maybe some Christmas cards being sent from various Big Ten locations to Brian Harsin down in Alabama. Who knows?
Cherney back out to punt. And room. Reed. Jaden Reed. Touchdown. Michigan State.
Hey, if you're going to wear number 1, you need to back it up. And Michigan State's Jaden Reed has certainly done that. Though I'm curious, is it referring to yourself in the third person when you actually do it through your jersey number? I'm asking for a friend who may be named Jaden. Spartan fans are asking to hear from Mel Tucker. So here is today's big interview. Coach Tuck, one-on-one with Dave Revson.
Mel, you guys were going through a walkthrough today, so we didn't really get a chance to see you practice. Give us a sense of the camp calendar and kind of why today was what it was.
Yeah, we're getting a couple of weeks of like a normal load of practice like we would do in game week. So today was a deload Thursday, and we'll go fast Friday, and then we'll scrimmage on Saturday, and then we'll go we'll have a similar week next week.
So what's the philosophy behind the way that you have structured the week? Because that is somewhat different in a game week than most programs have, the fact that you do go fast on Friday.
Yeah, well, I mean, we have a lot of data. We have a sports science person here, Bill Burkhardt, and so we've done some studies, and we believe that this is the best way to get our guys ready to go.
Let's talk a little bit about this team heading into the year. You have lost the element of surprise a little bit, right? You had that edge last year where you guys, I think, knew when we were here you were going to be pretty good, but the rest of the world certainly didn't know it. How do you keep the edge with this team when they're coming off a really good year rather than a last place year?
Yeah, well, we still have a chip on our shoulder. Our guys know that we still have a lot to prove. Every year is a new year. We're not sneaking up on anyone, but I don't think anyone's picking us to do anything this season either, and our guys know that. So it's all about reaching our full potential. We know what our goals are. We're working hard every day.
You do have still some fairly significant roster turnover, although far less than a year ago, but you still went fairly heavy in the portal with, I believe, 10 transfers on this roster who are new this year. What's the balancing act? I mean, you were kind of the program that everyone studied last year and said, this is the new era in the transfer portal world. This is what it's going to look like. What's the balancing act for you long-term between the portal and high school recruiting?
Yeah, well, we want to build through the high school ranks, but obviously there's a lot of really good players in the portal that are a good fit for us, and that's the key. We want to make sure that guys that we bring in here fit our culture and know what we're all about. The guys that we brought in from the portal are those type of guys. They fit in well. They're bought in already. We haven't been in the portal as much as we were past couple of years, and we're really trying to build through the high school ranks.
No player made more impact maybe in college football out of the portal last year than Kenneth Walker. He has, of course, moved on. You have 2 more transfers at running back. What do you see from that spot in each of those guys?
Yeah, well, Berger's done a great job. Jay Brew has done a great job. Very competitive guys. They know what the expectations are, and they know we're going to play the best players. And so we're deep at that position. I like what I've seen so far in camp, and again, we have to have production in our running game to have the type of offense that we want to have.
Part of that equation is the offensive line. I know you were low on numbers in the spring. What are you seeing now with that group?
Yeah, we're relatively healthy. The spring was a tough go for us. we had to do some modifications, and I felt bad for Coach Cap. But a lot of our young guys got more reps, and in the long run, it's really going to help us. But we're at full strength this fall campus, so I don't see any issues.
The other area of concern, I would say, for a lot of people based on performance last year was the secondary. There was no team in the country, as you know, that gave up more passing yards than Michigan State. Yeah. How has that group evolved from where it was at the end of last year to where it is now?
We're better than we were, and we're more sound. We have more experience. The detail is there. Our techniques have improved. Our pass rush has picked up as well. We need rush and coverage working together, but I feel good about the group.
You have a couple more scrimmages before you go live with your opening game, one coming up this Saturday, one the following week. What are you looking to get out of those scrimmages before you're ready to play?
We want to see guys take it from the practice field, into the scrimmage. We don't want them to go rat trap. Whatever we coach throughout the week, just put it out there on Saturday. And if the guys can do it in the scrimmage, they can do it in the game.
I need you to explain rat trap.
Rat trap is where 2 + 2 is 4 all week, and then you get into the game and 2 + 2 is something different than 4. It's like, what are we doing?
All right. Well, we should all try to avoid that. I think
that's
in our
right.
everyday
Absolutely.
Lives. Mel Tucker, always a pleasure. Thanks a lot, Coach.
Yeah, thank
really
you.
Appreciate it.
I love it. Tuck's rested, relaxed, maybe because of the walkthrough. He's also pretty jacked up still. Spent some time in the weight room. After a rough start during the COVID season, MSU bought into that philosophy, hit the transfer portal with a vengeance, and responded with an 11-win season last year. Offense was explosive, turnover margin flipped, and now Tucker is charged with doing it in back-to-back years. And so, Dave, that is the question. How do you do it twice when you've already done it once? Because the secret is out. No one's going to be surprised by Michigan State this year. I do love Tucker's attitude, though. When you make a jump like that, I think it's a little bit easier to keep the consistency when your head coach is as level and even-keeled as Tuck really is.
Yeah, he is, and he's I tell you what, he's done a great job of. It's impressed me. Everybody's getting all the transfer portal guys. We've been talking about that here for an hour. But I think it's a matter of getting the right players that would fit into your program. And then when you get them, a la Kenneth Walker III, getting the most out of those players. And I don't think anybody in the country has done a better job of that. And we're going to see that again this year. He talked about Berger, Broussard, the running backs that are transferring in on defense, probably because of his history at Alabama. He's got defensive guys that are going to show up at different spots from Georgia, from Florida, from Mississippi State, from the Southeast Conference. And so I think you got to give him credit for his evaluation and then getting the most out of his players. And they're going to have to – they could be a better team, and the record might not be as good, because they're not going to have a whole lot – they got two relatively – non-conference games that they should win. And that third game, they got to go out to Washington and play. You know what I mean? So they don't have a whole lot of cushion to get their football team to get through the growing pains.
Of course, they do have a veteran quarterback in Peyton Thorne,
Yes.
who ran the table last year, had some really nice moments, a couple of struggles. We talked about Reed. He is a game breaker on the outside, but there's no question to me, it is, can this running back room, because it is going to be by committee, perhaps led by Berger, the transfer from Wisconsin, can they get close
Yes.
to what Kenneth Walker did last year? Because he was the answer man. If you ever had an issue on offense, you simply handed the ball off to KW and you got 4.5, 5 yards at a minimum.
And they won a lot of games that were close. If the game was close last year, some of those teams, that's why they haven't knocked the door down. Michigan State, when the games were close last year, they found a way to win those games. Special teams, offense, defense. That's going to be that could determine how good a season they have or having a great season. Can you win those close games again, back-to-back years?
Well, if it's tasked to the defense, I think they can, because the defense was really good up front last year. They struggled on the back end, but now they have some experience. They have some transfer guys that you pointed out that they're trying to fit in to that secondary to make sure they don't give up the yardage they gave up last year. Because if you look at guys like Cal Halladay, he's a returning freshman All-American. Xavier Henderson has played a ton of football. They have experience back there. Mel Tucker told me a couple of times last year, we just had too many busts, too many missed coverages. That shouldn't happen for a team whose head coach is a defensive-minded guy.
And secondary, that was his expertise when he first started, was a secondary. They did hire a pass rush specialist, who I know personally, Brandon Jordan, to bring and try to bolster this defense and help that secondary out some. So Mel, he understands what he's got to do to take the next step.
Yeah, and taking that next step would mean getting to the Big Ten championship game. And it's asking a lot. You've shown you can beat Michigan. Can you beat an Ohio State? That game got ugly last year in a hurry. As soon as Ohio State shut down Walker and Michigan State had no answers. It'll be harder to find answers this year because now everybody expects Mel Tucker and the Spartans to have answers after such a terrific 2021.